Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah Longwell and Janelle Stelson.
Hey guys, how's it going? Yeah. Good to see all you centrists out here. Rowdy centrists, chill centrists, what are we feeling? What's the vibe in here? What's the problem with centrists, man? Everybody's so chill. So I'm Sarah Longwell. I'm the publisher of The Bulwark. I run Republican Voters Against Trump, and I am here. Yeah, thank you. But I'm very excited to be here with Janelle Stelson, who is from my home district in Pennsylvania, who is running as the Democrat, who is a former Republican, and who is running against one of the worst Republicans in Congress, Scott Perry.
Amen.
I'm so excited to meet you.
I'm excited to meet you as well, Sarah.
So quick question, are you gonna win?
Yes.
Yeah, all right.
And I say that not as one of these politicians who you have to, manifest it to make it happen. I say it as somebody who's been covering politics for the past couple of decades. I moderated Scott Perry's last 2 debates on my NBC station. So I know where his soft underbelly is, and I'm going after him.
So, you have something in common with one of my least favorite politicians, Kari Lake, which is that you were a former newscaster. And what I learned from watching Kari Lake and the fact that people, ultimately I think they arrived to the right decision on her, which was to not elect her. But for a long time, she had this imprimatur of being trusted because she had been sort of in their living rooms for such a long time. Do you feel like you get that from people too, where they know who you are and they feel like they trust you right out of the gate?
Well, I will say the lowest common denominator that I share with Kari Lake is that we were both on TV. Yeah. One of us is not trying to be President Trump's running mate previously. This is not for nothing. I'm in a +4 Republican district. It's, a lot of you may know it as Pennsyltucky. It's not Pittsburgh, it's not Philadelphia, it's the area around Harrisburg, the state capital, and a lot of people call it Pennsyltucky. But it's a place where there are a lot of Republicans, and we need to reach out to them. And I think being the trusted, nonpartisan voice for the past 38 years is going to get us the Republicans we need. I know on primary day, which was April 23rd, we're hopping from precinct to precinct, and I had a couple little old ladies hold my hand and pull me in and conspiratorially say, I wrote you in, and so did my husband. But other Republicans that were going into the polls and coming out were saying, can't vote for you today, but we got you in November. So I'm hoping that holds true.
So I am right from this district. My brother lives in York. My parents live in Boiling Springs. And it's one of those gerrymandered, weird districts that it has Harrisburg in it and then York in it. But it's got a lot of the voters who have been politically realigned out of the Republican Party. Cumberland County is still red, but it is bluing up a bit, yes?
Oh, not just a bit. Hamden Township in Cumberland County, which is closest to Harrisburg, closer than Carlisle, is turning blue. It's one of the fastest growing areas in the state, bringing Democrats in. Camp Hill, also in Cumberland County, right across the river from Harrisburg. The Susquehanna River, the mighty, mighty Susquehanna.
Do you know that my first job was, I was a crew member on the Pride of the Susquehanna?
Oh my gosh, it's not, for some reason it has repairs it needs. It's not floating this summer. So this is the first summer a lot of people have been disappointed.
I almost crashed that into the side of the Susquehanna River one time.
Well, you might have done some damage that they haven't repaired yet. Anyway, so Camp Hill went blue in 21 and has been building on those gains. The Hershey area, anybody eat Hershey chocolate? Yeah, that's my district. Proud to represent the Chocolate Workers Union, of course. But that area is turning increasingly blue. And for the first time, Dauphin County elected 2 of the 3 Dauphin County commissioners are Democrats for the first time since 1919. So things are trending in the proper direction. It's good.
So tell me, how do you reach out to these voters? What is your pitch to them because it's it's an R+4, you just said. Is it R+4, R+5?
Yeah.
All right, so you've got to win over. a serious number of Republicans. How
Yeah.
are you making the case to them?
Well, the case is that Scott Perry in no way, shape, or form represents Republicans anymore. We're going to be highlighting all the solo votes he has taken against all the Republicans and all the Democrats in the Pennsylvania congressional delegation. For instance, he voted not to house homeless veterans. He's a military veteran himself. He voted not to give veterans who breathed in the toxic fumes from burn pits. He voted not to give them health benefits. He voted not to protect firefighters from some of the toxic chemicals in their equipment. So this guy has taken so many negative votes. He's the only one in Pennsylvania who voted against giving the police that protected the Capitol January 6th. He's the only one who voted not to give them medals. The same guys who protected our Capitol, who protected him, who protected his colleagues, so that a few hours later he could stroll back into the chamber safely and vote to overturn all our votes. So I just am going to show Republicans exactly who they're voting for, and hoping that in November they might feel a little naughty when they go into the booth and vote for me, but they don't have to feel dirty.
Naughty but not dirty is a good
Name for your band?
Just like it's a good way to go through life, actually.
Well, one thing I wanted to add, too, this is a district, even though we're +4 Republican, we voted for our Democratic governor, Josh Shapiro, who made, or as I like to call him, the other JS, even though he doesn't call me that yet. But yeah, fun to have the highlight on him a little bit too. But we voted for him by 12 points over an extremist named Doug Mastriano, a state lawmaker. Ooh. Yeah, I know. But he's nothing but Scott Perry light. So I always call this a thinking district. We went for Trump by 4, 1 for Dr. Oz over now Senator Fetterman, and 12 points for Josh Shapiro. So people actually do their homework and research the candidates. And that's good news for me, because once you start paying attention to Scott Perry's record, I think you don't feel so great about him.
Would you say that there's, because first of all, I want to ask about why you got into this race, but before I ask you that, I want to, do you feel like, so sometimes Democrats, Joe Biden is trying to do this, where there's like MAGA Republicans and then there's just Republicans. Do you try to sort of separate people out like that? Like, do you feel like there's a way you're talking to the non-MAGA Republicans to get them to you?
Well, I got to say, I relish the flip more than anything else. So I'll take any Republican I can get, and all the better if they're MAGA Republicans. The TV thing is not nothing. It's given me tremendous name recognition, and there are a lot of MAGA folks who are like, oh, I just love you on TV. They can't quite reconcile it in their brains that I'm not in their party because they liked me on TV and they think I'm in their party. But that's going to be useful. And I was a Republican for a long time, too, so.
So why did you run? Again, was it just, were you watching Scott Perry and thought, oh my God, somebody's got to get in there and run against this guy? But like, what motivated you to do this?
I will say I got into this business 38 years ago because it has the power to affect change, meaning journalism. And, did a lot of great stories, collected some little gold statues that reward you for your hard work. But the one story that kept getting worse, Scott Perry. Watching him, I was live on the set in 2022 when the Supreme Court handed down the Dobbs decision overturning Roe, and had to look out into the camera in my best nonpartisan way and tell every woman watching that her rights had been rolled back 50 years. And that took a chunk out of my heart. And something else really terrible happened after. I went back up to the newsroom when our live coverage ended, and the guy who runs our assignment desk, big guy, works out all the time, tats all over, kind of a crazy hairdo, handles a lot of traumatic things in the news. You go cover the child who fell into the pond and drowned. You go cover the fire, the big accident. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes when I said, "What is going on? Are you okay?" And he said, "Janelle, you don't..."
Sorry, but a big, strong man with tears in his eyes?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, just checking.
And listen to why. He looked at me and he said, "Janelle, you don't know this, but my wife was raped. And had she not had abortion available to her, our lives would be ruined." So it's a really important thing to remember as I'm out campaigning, that this is not a women's issue. It's a really, one of the more paramount issues that we will ever have in recent history, but it's not a woman's issue. It's the men that love us and the families that love us. It's for all of us. And so there's that, and I had to call Congressman Perry, call our local people, and ask what their reaction was to the Supreme Court decision. And he was dancing a little jig. For the past 7 years, he has sponsored the Life at Conception Act, which is a nationwide abortion ban with no exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother, and he feels the same way about IVF. And I don't want these old, white, crinkly men making decisions about what I can do with my body.
How much are you running on abortion as a top issue right now?
It's really important. It supersedes partisan politics right now. There are a lot of women that are Republicans who say the same thing. Don't tell me when I can start a family, how I can start it, who I can start it with. This is none of your damn business.
So the interesting thing about the district that you're in is that it has a lot of college-educated suburban voters there in sort of Dauphin County. It's got some big urban centers, but you also have some real rural parts. You're not quite in Perry County, which is actually where I grew up, but you're right. Yeah, I really grew up in Pennsylvania.
That makes me think a whole different thing about you.
Yeah, no, that's why I have such good manners. But I guess the question is like, are you able to reach more of those rural voters? Because one of the reasons that Josh Shapiro has been so effective in Pennsylvania is he really was able to make an economic argument to working class voters that they seemed to hear, and they heard it over the cultural dog whistles of Doug Mastriano. And so how are you trying to appeal to maybe what were the sort of Obama-Trump voters?
Well, I'd say that a lot of people's needs, no matter where they live, after 12 years of relative inaction by Scott Perry, I mean, he's the chief obstructionist of this 118th Congress that has accomplished fewer pieces of legislation than at any time since the Great Depression back in the 1930s. He's really holding up anybody doing the people's work. So for the past 12 years, needs that weren't urgent in the district are now urgent, in addition to the really big things that need attention, the border, guns, all of this kind of thing. So we're working on everything and realizing that the needs in some of the more rural areas, like if you're upset about the price of gas, it's more upsetting if you live in a rural area because you have to drive further to get where you need to go. So that matters even more. So looking at the entire equation, there's a lot that needs to be done.
So you were a Republican, just like me. I was also a Republican.
Cheers.
Was, I guess, being the operative word for both of us.
Well, I love the welcome pack on their main page. It says, future former Republicans. And I'm like, oh, that's a nice phrase. I like that from the beginning.
That was Pete Buttigieg, I believe, who coined that. Why did you leave the Republican Party?
This isn't going to be one of those, I didn't leave, it left me. It wasn't that. I registered in the party that my parents were in many decades ago, and then I had a job for the past roughly 40 years that required me to be absolutely nonpartisan. So I didn't give it a lot of thought. I did, I did what I wanted to do behind the scenes and didn't think it was a big deal. But when I got serious about running for office, I needed to run in, the coat of armor that fit me, and it was the Democrats.
Okay. Pennsylvania, huge prize in the upcoming election.
Yeah.
Two-part question. One, do you think Kamala Harris should pick Josh Shapiro as her vice president? Two, if she did, would that deliver Pennsylvania in 2024 to the Democrats?
Well, I'm not a pundit, and I'm very focused on Scott Perry in the 10th, but I will say at the top of the ticket, it's always exciting to have more attention on your state. Pennsylvania gets its share of attention for obvious reasons anyway, but we would also make some history if she chooses Josh Shapiro. Our lieutenant governor is elevated, who is Austin Davis, who's a terrific guy. People love him, he's popular. He would be the first African-American governor of Pennsylvania. So there are a lot of pluses if he chooses Shapiro, who's enormously popular in Pennsylvania.
Why do you think he is again, two-part question. Why do you think he's so popular in Pennsylvania? I mean, he's got over a 60+% approval rating.
I think it's because he's the perfect welcome pack guy. He's the kind of guy, and I'd like to think this is the kind of politician I would be. He's a pragmatist who reaches across the aisle to get things done. None of this partisan paralyzation that we see so much here in Washington. I think people are looking for somebody fresh and somebody who's not the same old, partisan bickering that doesn't get our work done, and he is that.
So I'm a Shapiro stan, and I'm out there lobbying hard to a bunch of people who don't listen to me about why he should be the vice presidential pick because I think they got to win Pennsylvania. And so I'm going to ask again, actually, do you think that Pennsylvania would, do you think he's popular enough that he could bring the state along if he was on the ticket?
I'm not sure that the top of the ticket needs that. I think they might do very well anyway.
You do?
I do. I think it's going to be tight, but I think they're going to pull it out. And Josh Shapiro would just be a little icing on that cake.
How do you think the race has changed since Joe Biden stepped down?
I think probably everybody in here, because you're all already deeply involved in politics, is acutely aware that people are more galvanized. There's just more electricity surrounding it. I know I was shooting for an ad campaign when I got the news, and my brilliant media strategist, one of the best guys in the country, looked up at me, and we were having not a great Middle Eastern lunch. They forgot the hummus, they forgot the pita bread, so we were kind of gnawing on some tomatoes, and he's like, "This is the best lunch I've had in years." And I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure he's not talking about the food. And for about a half second, I entertained myself by thinking he was talking about me, that he got to have lunch with me. No. He said our chances of winning just rose exponentially. So I think there are a lot of people. It was all set to be a non-traditional year when people were not maybe as excited as we would wish they would be about the top of the ticket. So we thought some of the races like Senator Casey was going to be a huge race. And my race, certainly in PA 10, were going to actually help buoy the top of the ticket. And now it looks like we may get a little fun off the top.
Oh, I'm glad you brought up Casey versus McCormick, because I would say McCormick's been an interesting one to watch. He obviously lost to Dr. Oz, but for those of us who had been Republicans, he is somebody who we're pretty sure was one of us, but then tried to run MAGA. But I don't know, I think people can sniff it out on him or something, and he lost that primary, but they cleared the way for him this time around. And I think they hope that he can
Or did his money clear the way for him?
Something cleared the way for him. Yeah. It's been Mitch McConnell and the money somewhere in there, they got it. Do you think that he is able to pull back some of these sort of college-educated suburban voters who've been politically realigning out of the party by coding a little less MAGA?
I think he's a carpetbagger, and people in Pennsylvania aren't going to go for that. I think he was before, and that's probably why he didn't gain enough traction. And I think, he can flood the state with all the money he wants, but I think Bob Casey's a pretty good guy. He's not one of these wackos. He's kind of a centrist, again, another pragmatist that works to do the people's business. I think he's going to be fine. To contrast, so Senator Casey has an ad up in Pennsylvania now that shows it's like a grocery store at night, and a guy in black creeps in and he replaces the big box of Cheerios with a little box and talks about shrinkflation and how greedy the corporations are, which is exactly part of the message we want to get out there. And meanwhile, McCormick has ads showing him on the wrestling mats when he was young and from West Point, and it's like, dude, people care about the Cheerios.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. It may not be the best time for a billionaire to run in Pennsylvania. Possibly, yeah. Okay, well, I used to do this thing, so I do a lot of focus groups with voters.
Okay.
And my favorite place to drive, because I could, when I was doing them in person before the pandemic hit and we moved mostly to Zoom, I would drive down to York.
Yeah.
And I would do focus groups all the time in York, Pennsylvania.
York, which in 1777 was the nation's capital for about 9 months.
Yeah, and if you've never been to York, you'd know it because when you're driving up the highway, there's an enormous man holding a barbell on top of
York
one of the...
barbell.
Yeah.
So cool.
This room doesn't seem to get it, but it's very important to us. It's a very important landmark for people
They
like
might
us.
know we have all the snack foods in that area too, depending on if anybody's eating potato chips or Cheeto-y anything, it probably came from York County.
Yeah. No, they're just...
And we have Hershey's.
Hershey's, Utz potato chips. This crowd doesn't realize the gems that we hold in central Pennsylvania. Lebanon bologna, anybody? Come on.
Out of district,
Bologna. Pronounce Bologna if you're local. Anyways, so I used to drive down there all the time, and I would talk to different demographic groups. And one of the things that strikes me is that it is still a pretty, I guess I would say center-right state. That is willing to elect Democrats in large part because the Republican Party seems to have moved into such a crazy place. And so do you ever look at the National Party and think about the kind of Democrats that people are running in Pennsylvania right now, people like you, people like Josh Shapiro, people like Casey, these sort of more centrist, you guys win in Pennsylvania. So when you look at the national party, do you think, hey guys, over here, like there's a model here that maybe people should think about?
People dislike Scott Perry so much, I can't tell you how many members of Congress have reached out whom I do not know outside of the Pennsylvania delegation and have said, you have no idea what a service you are doing your country by trying to take Scott Perry out. But I wanted to kind of flip this, if I may, and ask you, you are such an expert in this space. How do I get those central Republicans, central right? You know, how do we do that? How do I get the constituency I need?
Well, look, it sounds to me like you're doing a great job. So it sounds like you're crushing it already. The one thing that you haven't, you mentioned it in passing, but that I think is a real vulnerability for Democrats, and it's interesting because some people are like, why would anybody in Pennsylvania care so much about immigration? But I know from listening to voters, it is a huge issue. And I'm sure it's one that Scott Perry is going to hit you with all the time to say, you know, you're some part of the open borders plan. And so how do you talk about immigration to these swing voters?
Well, first of all, it's kind of funny because I've been on a TV news desk. I haven't done anything about abortion, immigration, you know, any of these things. So when he tries to, I saw he already on social media was like, Joe Biden and Janelle Stelson's policies. And I'm like, I don't have a policy. I mean, I do have a policy, but I don't have policies you can go after. But again, I see this as one of the things. Immigration is a big deal for all of us. And I would say it's an American problem. We absolutely need to secure the border. We need to make sure the fentanyl is not coming over. I'm not sure why we're not attacking fentanyl at the lab level and why we're letting it get this far. But this is not a, you know, Scott Perry was down at the border a couple of months ago telling us, breaking news, there's a problem at the border. There's an immigration crisis. So is anybody in this room didn't know that? Go ahead, we won't make fun of you. Anyway, I think it's one of those things where, you know, you have to appropriately fund everything that happens on the border, from the border agents to the judges to the attorneys. And if somebody is deemed to have an illegitimate claim, they do not have a legitimate claim to be in America, they get sent back to their home country in an expeditious humanitarian fashion. And conversely, if somebody does have a legitimate claim, let's get them working. We have many open jobs in our district that would be, you know, would welcome a bigger workforce. And let's get them assimilated into our communities and neighborhoods, find out where they want to be, if they have any family here, what kind of jobs they like to do, and let's get them, you know, working, sending money back home, which is what many of them dream of doing, and paying taxes like the rest of us. And if we do this right, you know, with climate change, we're going to have climate refugees. The migrant crisis is going to get worse, not better. But if we do this right, we can be a shining example for democracy around the world, and it could be a win-win situation. We can strengthen ourselves on every front.
Last question, yes or no. Do you debate Scott Perry? Do you guys?
I would love to.
He's not doing
As I said, I have moderated. I don't know, because the way it works, because I've been on the other side, is that you put the invitation out and a candidate will agree or not agree or can't do it on a certain date, so you go back to the other one. So I'm not sure where we are. My team would like to do 2 debates. We would love to do them in October, and I would love Representative Perry to join us.
So debate me, bro. Okay, so, well, I got to say, since we come from the same place, I don't know that they could have made somebody in a lab, speaking of labs, that is a better fit for that district to go and beat an incumbent who is a, pardon the January 6th, the people were just taking a tour of the Capitol, insurrectionists like Scott Perry.
Oh, yeah, let's not forget, he was the one who said Italian satellites had screwed with the machines, the voting machines, and turned the Trump votes into Biden votes, even though his votes were on the same machines, but we're fine. You know, he's the architect of January 6th, one of them. The FBI seized his cell phone in the investigation, and now he's on the Intel committee overseeing the FBI. Little chicken or fox guarding the hen house, basically. So, I mean, the great news is, as a first-timer, I wouldn't know how to run a normal congressional campaign, because this guy gives us ammunition every day to take him down. So if I can't do it, I fear for the Republic.
Well, I'm sure I speak for everybody when I say good luck to you.
Thank you.
I hope you win, and I hope that the Democratic Party takes notice of the kind of candidate and the kind of campaign that you're running and tries to replicate it absolutely everywhere. Thank you so much.
Geez, Sarah, thank you. That's high praise. Thank you.